My sister stole my college boyfriend, called me a doormat in discount shoes, and laughed when he dumped me for her at a party, in front of everyone. 7 years later, she showed up to her first day at a new job, full of confidence and charm, not realizing the woman signing her onboarding paperwork was me, her new boss. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 30 years old, and I used to believe that being quiet and kind would earn me loyalty. That belief shattered one night in college when my older sister Lindsay strutted into a frat party, flipped her hair, and walked out with my boyfriend on her arm. I dated Connor for almost a year. We were the quiet kind of couple, the kind that stayed in watching documentaries and ordering pad thai instead of going to ragers. But Lindsay said I was boring, and she proved her point by seducing him in front of everyone. The breakup was humiliating, but it wasn't just about him. It was how she mocked me afterwards. Maybe if you wore real makeup and didn't dress like a teaching assistant, he wouldn't have wandered, she told me during Thanksgiving, as my parents laughed like it was some cute sibling spat. That night, I locked myself in my room and cried so hard I gave myself a migraine. I didn't even have the words to fight back. I just disappeared. I packed a single suitcase and told my parents I needed space. They didn't ask questions. Lindsay smirked and called me melodramatic. That was the last time I stepped foot in their house. I couch surfed with a friend for a few weeks, took a job at a diner, and enrolled in night classes at the community college downtown. I didn't have a plan, only a stubborn voice in my head whispering, "Make yourself too big for them to ignore." There were nights I scrubbed dishes until 3 a.m., went straight to class at 8, and cried in the supply closet during breaks because I missed who I used to be, or maybe who I thought I was supposed to become. But that pain, it hardened into grit. I didn't want revenge then. I wanted distance. I wanted to prove to no one in particular that I could be more than the quiet, boring girl no one defended. But before I tell you how my sister ended up sitting across from me in a glass-walled office with her job on the line, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by the one person who should have had your back. Because you have no idea how karma wears a name badge. I cut off my entire family after that Thanksgiving. No calls, no visits, no explanations. If they noticed, they never let on. And maybe that was the part that hurt most. Not just that Lindsay betrayed me, but that no one cared enough to stop her. I was just the background character in my own family, the nice daughter who didn't need attention. So I disappeared, and no one came looking. I moved into a crumbling studio apartment above a laundromat. The wallpaper peeled like old sunburn, and the heater made a choking sound whenever I turned it on. I used to press my ear against the wall at night and listen to the neighbor's TV just so I didn't feel so alone. I worked at a diner during the day, picked up dog walking shifts in the evening, and took online classes at night. I barely slept. My phone stayed silent. Lindsay, meanwhile, was thriving, at least from what little I let myself see. Her Instagram was a highlight reel of expensive dinners, spa days, and beach trips with Connor. She posted cryptic quotes like, "If you can't handle me at my best, you don't deserve me at all," and I hated how many people liked them. I'd block her for a few weeks, then unblock her just to torture myself again. I know, stupid, but you do stupid things when you're grieving a life you thought you'd have. My turning point came one freezing Tuesday, when I slipped on black ice delivering coffee for extra tips. I cracked my elbow, spilled $24 worth of cappuccinos, and sobbed in the middle of a sidewalk. Some guy stepped over me like I was trash. That night, I applied to 10 internships in tech. I didn't feel ready, but I was done playing small. I had a halfway decent GPA, a few good references from school, and a rage-fueled cover letter I rewrote 12 times until it sounded like someone who believed in herself. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a startup called Loopwork Technologies. They were scrappy but growing fast, and they offered me a paid internship on their dev team. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even full-time, but it was mine, and it was the first thing I'd earned without anyone's permission or pity. I still remember walking into their tiny office for the first time. The air smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. I didn't know it yet, but that little internship, it would become the start of the life Lindsay never imagined I could have. Loopwork Technologies felt like stepping into another universe. Everyone wore hoodies, half the team worked standing up, and dogs were allowed in the office. One golden retriever even had its own name badge. My first day, I was handed a second-hand laptop, a shared desk near the supply closet, and a vague directive. Tinker with the UI bugs and document everything. I had no idea what I was doing, but I smiled, nodded, and stayed 4 hours late that night to figure it out. I started small, fixed a button glitch here, rewrote some CSS there. I watched YouTube tutorials until my eyes ached, and every time I hit submit on a bug fix and someone noticed, it felt like a tiny crack forming in the version of myself that thought I was worthless. By month 3, I wasn't just fixing things, I was building them. My manager, Julian, took me out for coffee one afternoon and said, "You think like a product designer, not just a code monkey. Ever considered shifting your path?" I laughed. I thought I was barely hanging on. He smiled. "Claire, you're the only intern who breaks things just to learn how to fix them. That's how good engineers are made." That conversation changed everything. I shifted into UI UX, started leading small design sprints, and eventually landed a full-time role. I still worked nights at the diner for a while, just until I could afford to drop it. Then one day, I closed my last table, clocked out, and walked into the night air knowing I'd never go back. Years passed, Loopwork scaled, we got funding, new offices, a rebrand. I stayed through all of it, through sleepless launches, layoff scares, and a promotion drought that nearly broke me. But I also stayed because I believed in it and in myself. I made friends, saved money, built a tiny world I could actually control. I never spoke about my family. No one knew the girl who used to cry behind the laundromat walls. No one knew that the reason I was always the last to leave was because I never wanted to go home to silence. And I liked it that way. The anonymity, the reinvention. Then, just before my 30th birthday, I got an email from HR with the subject: new hire, team alignment needed. I clicked it, reviewed the candidate resume like I always did, and froze. There, in plain black text, Lindsay Morgan. My sister had just been hired at Loopwork, in my department. I stared at the screen for so long my coffee went cold. Lindsay Morgan, marketing coordinator, assigned to my product team. There was no mistaking it. Same spelling, same hometown, same sister who once told me my existence was off-brand. At first, I thought maybe it was a cruel coincidence. Some other Lindsay Morgan. But when I pulled up her application and saw the attached photo, I nearly choked. Same smug smile, same perfectly curled blonde hair. My stomach flipped. It had been almost 7 years since I'd seen her in person. I wondered if she'd changed, if she even remembered me. Did she know I worked here? Surely not. I'd changed my LinkedIn settings to private long ago, deleted all traces of myself online after I disappeared, but still the odds felt cosmic. Out of all the tech companies in the city, she landed here. I thought about going to HR, about flagging a conflict of interest, but what would I even say? Hey, my sister emotionally gutted me in college and now I'd like her employment reconsidered? No, that would give her power again. Instead, I replied with a clipped professional, confirmed. We'll oversee orientation. The next Monday, she walked into the conference room, all polished confidence and expensive perfume. She didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. I guess the years and a drastic haircut had done their job. She shook my hand like I was just another manager, said her name was Lindsay. I smiled tightly. Claire, I replied. No last name. Her brow furrowed for half a second, then she moved on. Watching her sit across from me, wide-eyed and eager to impress, was surreal. This woman who once tore me down without a second thought, now taking notes while I walked her through onboarding. I kept it professional. I always do. But every so often, when she spoke in that same condescending tone she used on me growing up, like she was always the smartest person in the room, I felt a cold anger simmering under my skin. That first week, she bragged during lunch about her natural knack for branding and her instinctive leadership style. I listened, nodded, and filed it all away. She didn't remember me now, but I remembered everything. And if there's one thing I'd learned over the years, it's this. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's just the start of the setup. For the first few weeks, I watched Lindsay from a distance. I didn't hover, didn't micromanage, just observed. She was exactly how I remembered her, charming in meetings, quick with buzzwords, and constantly fishing for attention. She'd pepper her presentations with words like synergy and omnichannel, even when they made no sense, but she had this way of making people feel like she knew what she was talking about until you actually looked at her work. And I did. I reviewed every report she turned in, every mock-up, every email she sent with my name CC'd. What I found was messy. Typos in client drafts, inconsistent branding in presentations. She even spelled a major investor's name wrong in a company-wide proposal. I should have pulled her aside, given her a chance to fix it, but something in me hesitated. I wanted to see what she'd do on her own. Turns out she did what she always did, flattered and deflected. When my lead designer, Mason, questioned a strategy she'd proposed, she laughed it off and said, "Oh, I just thought we were vibing more bold rebellion this quarter." You know, giving Gen Z energy. Mason looked like he wanted to climb out the window. Still, I didn't act. Not yet. I didn't want to seem biased. I'd worked too hard to build my reputation here, and the last thing I needed was gossip that I was targeting a new hire out of personal issues, so I documented everything. Quietly, thoroughly. And then one day, I overheard her talking to someone in the break room. She was laughing loudly about how the company was full of softies who didn't know real talent when they saw it. She said she was basically running the team already and joked that she should be groomed for leadership. My jaw clenched. I walked right past her without flinching, but inside I was boiling. Because here's the thing. Loopwork had become my home, my reputation, my sanctuary. I'd helped build it from nothing, and I wasn't going to let her wreck it with glitter and empty talk. So I scheduled a one-on-one check-in, just her and me. My assistant sent the invite, Thursday, 10 a.m., feedback and goals. She accepted within 5 minutes, responding with a winking emoji and the word yes. I stared at her reply and whispered, "Let's begin." The morning of our one-on-one, I dressed differently. Not flashy, just sharper. Tailored black slacks, a slate blouse, hair slicked into a low bun. Power without saying a word. I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for the girl who once walked out of our childhood home in dollar store sneakers with a cracked phone and a broken heart. Lindsay breezed into the meeting room 5 minutes late, holding a venti iced coffee like it was a designer purse. "Sorry, Claire." "Elevator stopped on every floor," she said. sliding into the seat across from me with a grin. I didn't smile back. Let's begin, she blinked, a little thrown, then pulled out a notebook. So, I'm assuming this is just a performance touch base? Should I run you through my recent campaign stats? I nodded. Sure. Let's start with the Midtown client proposal, the one that misrepresented their core demographic and used off-brand font. She frowned. Wait, that one got approved. Because I fixed it, I said evenly, internally, before it reached the client. But it shouldn't have needed fixing, Lindsay. It was riddled with mistakes. And this isn't the first time. Her posture changed, a little stiffer now. I was trying to inject some boldness. They love the energy, right? They nearly pulled the contract when they saw the draft. Our account manager smoothed it over. She went quiet. I opened a file folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a printed log of every documented error, every client complaint that passed through me, and notes from 2 other team leads. This is a pattern, and it's unacceptable, I said. You've been with us 3 weeks. This is your formal write-up. Her mouth dropped. Wait, what? A write-up? Seriously? I didn't flinch. I take performance seriously. Everyone is held to the same standard, but she started, then stopped. Something flickered in her eyes. She tilted her head. Have we met before? My pulse spiked. Why do you ask? You just seem weirdly familiar, she said, squinting. Your voice, the way you say my name. I stared at her and said nothing. She laughed nervously. Never mind. Probably just déjà vu. I stood. This concludes our check-in. You'll receive documentation via email. Please confirm by end of day. She nodded, lips tight. I could tell she wasn't used to being spoken to like that. By another woman, let alone one in authority, she still had no idea. But she would. After that meeting, Lindsay kept her head down for about 3 days. Then the charm crept back in. She made loud, performative compliments in the hallway, brought donuts for the team, started tagging me in cheerful Slack messages like we were friends. I ignored all of it. I wasn't here to play her game. I was here to do my job and make damn sure she didn't sabotage mine. What struck me most was how oblivious she still was. She never once connected the dots, never questioned why I seemed cool toward her, why I never joined in on her forced small talk, why I didn't laugh at her jokes. To her, I was just another manager in a pantsuit. Then came the team brainstorm meeting. Lindsay pitched a campaign slogan for a sustainability client that was, well, stolen, word for word from an eco-startup's website. I recognized it immediately because I'd followed that startup for years. I let her finish, then gently asked, did you come up with that line yourself? She blinked. Well, yeah, kind of. I tweaked it from something I saw online. It's identical to Greenpulse's mission statement, I replied. That's plagiarism. The room went quiet. Her eyes flicked around. Oh, I thought it was just a general vibe. I didn't know it was trademarked. It doesn't have to be. That's still stealing. I moved on quickly, not giving her time to spiral, but I saw it. That flicker of panic. She knew she'd slipped, and this time, I hadn't covered for her. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. Claire, can we talk? I stopped, briefly. She hesitated. I feel like you don't like me. I raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? I don't know. You're just colder than the other leads. Everyone else seems to like me, but you're different. Did I do something wrong? I looked her in the eye and simply said, your work speaks for itself, Lindsay. That's all that matters here. She didn't respond. She just nodded slowly and walked away, frowning. Back in my office, I shut the door and exhaled. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. I wasn't out for petty revenge. I wanted accountability. And if she couldn't handle being seen without the filter of flattery, that wasn't my problem. Still, part of me wondered, how much longer could she go without recognizing me? It was the little things that chipped away at her mask. The way she lingered too long when I spoke in meetings, the double takes, the nervous laugh whenever I corrected her in front of others. She was starting to feel it, that itch you get when something's off but you can't explain why. And still, she didn't know. That was almost poetic. Then came the final test. I assigned her to co-lead a product relaunch campaign, not out of cruelty, but to see if she'd finally rise to the challenge or keep coasting on charisma. She was paired with Mason, who'd already clashed with her once, and I made it clear this was a make-or-break task. We had 2 weeks to prep for a high-stakes client pitch, and I was watching every step. Lindsay showed up with grand ideas. All buzz, no substance. Let's make the interface disruptive yet intuitive, she gushed. Like rebellious mindfulness? Mason looked like he wanted to choke on his pen. I didn't intervene. I let her run. Over the next week, her half of the project stalled. She missed internal deadlines, sent incomplete slides, and even skipped a prep call because she was in flow at a cafe with no Wi-Fi. Mason, furious, looped me in on everything. At this point, I could have shut it down, protected the project. Instead, I made a choice. I let her fail. In her own words, on her own merit. I presented the full campaign draft to the client with both our names clearly listed, and when the flaws were pointed out, inconsistent messaging, a confusing tagline, missing performance data, I said calmly, that section was led by Lindsay. She'll address the concerns. Lindsay's face paled as she fumbled through a shaky explanation. The client was polite but curt. After the call, she cornered me outside the glass conference room. Her voice trembled. Why didn't you jump in? Why didn't you help me? I shrugged. It's your campaign. You said you had it handled. I didn't know they'd grill me like that. That's kind of the job. She blinked, wide-eyed. For the first time, the confident facade cracked. You're really something else, Claire. What is your problem with me? I looked her dead in the eye and said, You really don't remember, do you? And just like that, something in her expression shifted. She started to speak, but I walked away. The reveal was coming. But not yet. The silence between us after that was thick enough to choke on. Lindsay didn't try to chat in the hallway anymore. No more donuts, no flirty Slack messages, no empty praise. Just stiff nods and averted eyes. She knew something was off. She just didn't know how much. Then came the final straw. One of our biggest legacy clients, a clean energy company that made up nearly 20% of our quarterly revenue, flagged a serious inconsistency in our campaign rollout. They'd been promised a metrics report that never arrived. After a bit of digging, I traced the missed deliverable to Lindsay. It had been sitting in her drafts folder, unsent for 4 days. I called her into my office. She came in cautiously this time, no iced coffee, no flashy earrings, just her and a notebook she didn't open. I assume you know why you're here, I began. She nodded slowly. The metrics report, that's right. You didn't send it. I meant to, things have been a little chaotic, and I figured I could. You figured wrong, I cut in. That client escalated it to the VP. I had to personally smooth things over. You're lucky they didn't pull the contract. She looked down, lips pressed tight. I'm sorry. I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for accountability and honesty. She looked up then, something flickering in her eyes. I've been trying, Claire. Really, I don't know. I feel like I can't get my footing here. Maybe that's because you're trying to rely on the same tactics that worked in rooms where no one challenged you. She winced. Why do you say that? I stood and walked to the window, looked out for a moment, then turned back to face her. You humiliated your sister in college, stole her boyfriend, mocked her in front of family. And when she left, no one came after her. No one even noticed. Her breath caught. I stepped closer, calm, precise. And now, years later, you walked into this company not knowing she helped build it, that she would be your boss. Lindsay froze, pale, shaking. Claire? I nodded once. Claire Morgan? Your sister. She covered her mouth like she'd just been punched. Oh my God. Now you remember. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just said, let's talk about what happens next. Lindsay stared at me like she was trying to rewind the past 10 years and figure out where she missed the signs. Her face went pale, then red, then something close to panic. Claire. I didn't know. I swear. I had no idea. I believe you, I said calmly. You never looked closely enough to know. She sank into the chair like her spine had given out. I didn't recognize you. You look different. I am different, I said. You helped make sure of that. For a moment, she just sat there, mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Finally, she whispered, Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I wanted to see if anything had changed. If you had changed. She looked away. I continued, You've coasted on charm your whole life. But this place, this team, we work. We show up. We don't cut corners or take shortcuts or recycle buzzwords from Pinterest. And frankly, I don't care if you're my sister or not. If you can't meet the standard, you won't last here. Her hands were shaking now. Claire, I was awful to you. I know that. I thought you just vanished. That you couldn't handle life after Connor left you. I didn't think that I'd survive. I cut in. That I'd outgrow all of you? She nodded slowly, ashamed. There was a long pause. The air between us was thick with all the things we'd never said, all the times she'd laughed while I cried, all the silence I'd swallowed so I wouldn't break. Then I stood. You have 2 options. You can step up and do this job right, really right, or you can walk away. But know this, I'm not your backup singer anymore. If you're here, you work, you grow, or you go. She looked up at me with tears brimming. I want to stay. I'll earn it. I held her gaze. Then prove it. She nodded. Quiet for once. That was the day I took back everything she thought she'd destroyed. My voice, my power. My seat at the table. She walked out of that office stunned. Her world flipped, and for the first time, I wasn't the sister left behind. I was the one setting the standard. The days that followed were oddly quiet. Lindsay showed up on time. She submitted drafts early. She started asking questions instead of pretending she knew everything. I didn't praise her. I didn't punish her either. I simply treated her like I would any other team member with something to prove. To her credit, she didn't push back. Not once. She was awkward around me, sure. Fumbled her words, flinched whenever I walked by. But she showed up. She worked late. She corrected her own mistakes. There were no more cutesy emails or dramatic declarations, just effort. And that, for the first time in her life, actually meant something. A month passed, then another. One Friday evening, she knocked on my office door holding a folder in her hands. This is the revised pitch deck for the Apex account, she said, placing it on my desk. Thanks, I said, barely glancing up. She hesitated. There's something else. I looked at her. I wanted to say, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I see you now. Not just the role, you. I was cruel. I used to think that being the loudest made me the most powerful person in the room. But watching you work, seeing what you've built, it made me realize how small I really was. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I stood, walked around my desk, and handed her the folder back. You've got talent, Lindsay. You always did. But the real power? It's in showing up when it's hard, owning your impact, being willing to grow. She nodded, eyes glassy. Then I'll keep showing up, she whispered. That was the closest we'd ever come to peace. We're not close now. We may never be. But she stayed. She worked. And when performance reviews came around, she'd earned a raise. Not because she was my sister, but in spite of it. Me? I kept climbing. New role, bigger title, more say. And sometimes, when I walk by her desk and see her head down, truly focused, I feel something surprising. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. Because in the end, I didn't need to ruin her to win. I just needed to become someone she couldn't ignore.